From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. Today, we are extra happy this is an audio podcast because right now we look like a couple fourth graders having a sleepover. And now, broadcasting from Nick's blanket fort, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some pod therapy.
So if you are a listener of the show, but you have never dialed us in on Twitter or Facebook or gone to the website, this is the week that you really want to do that because we are absolutely putting pictures up of this. It is glorious. As I look at Nick, I see a giant purple velveteen blanket hanging up on his wall. And beneath that, he is draped in a leopard print throw of some kind with tassels. And he is sitting in some kind of red armchair circa 1930s World War II footage. Are you taking a picture of me? He's snapping a picture as I'm talking.
I'm doing a video.
Oh, this is a video?
Yeah.
So this is Jim's blanket fort. I am in I have a ceiling unlike Nick, and mine has an aqua top, and and I'm also in a red chair.
Yep, and we're gonna pan over.
Yeah,
to
and
Nick.
There's Nick, and he's got his leopard print and his purple and his mic on a chair. So this is our blanket fort episode, low key. And if you're wondering, guys, you usually broadcast live from Level 9 Studios. What the heck happened? Dude, somebody ransacked Level 9 Studios. They went in there and took all the mics and stuff. So poor Scott. So we should do a Scott aid, like a chef aid.
Scott aid.
Yeah, Scott aid. Raise money.
We should do something. That was really terrible.
Yeah, man.
As far as I know, this is the first time this has happened. So he's produced a lot of music videos.
Oh, yeah.
He's recorded a lot, with a lot of hip hop artists and everything.
Right.
And then we were his first podcast.
Yeah.
He started with us.
Yeah.
And then everything went downhill.
Everything went downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah. The riot happened.
The podcasts are this generation's skateboarder, I think. They're just the ones that you can't trust, and the kids, the hooligans.
The hooligans.
Yeah, we're definitely when the podcasters are the hooligans.
Got it. Yeah, and if you're out there and you're thinking, in the last several months since I started listening to Pod Therapy, things have gone wrong in my life. Well, now you know why. Just do the math. It's like a conspiracy board. There's strings. Ever since I started listening to this damn show, all of a sudden I had to pay my taxes. All these weird things are happening.
It's actually very strange how true that is, that we destroy everything we touch, pretty much.
That's like the opposite of Midas. Everything we touch turns to ash.
Yeah.
So, here we are in our blanket fort, Nick, and thank you for hosting us at Level Nick Studios here in our fourth grade blanket fort. But the show must go on, despite the tragedy at Level 9, and so we have some interesting research that just came out, hot off the press.
Right. And, speaking of everything that we touch, we destroy.
Yeah, let's take a look at this ashy research. But no, this is actually pretty interesting. So, the study that we're going to talk about is about male post-coital dysphoria. So I'll translate all that. Male means boys.
Right. With you so far.
Post means after. Coital means sexual orgasm, and dysphoria means sadness. So we're talking about after sex sadness for men. So it was a first of its kind study, and basically it wanted to measure whether men get sad after sex, and if so, how often do we see that? There had been previous studies that had observed it in women. So this post-coital dysphoria basically is described as feelings of sadness, tearfulness, irritability, like a desire to just kind of not be social, not be near the other person, which I think as people hear that, they kind of think, oh, wow, that's a thing. Okay, so maybe I've experienced that in my life where I don't want to be around somebody after sex, or my partner kind of pulls away. What's the deal with that? So basically, this was a study by Joel, and I'm going to destroy your last name, Joel, but it's Max Kowiak. That's it, Max Kowiak. Yeah, and Robert D. Schweitzer, that one's a little bit easier. And they're in Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. So they did the study with about 1,200 men spread out in the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Russia, and some other countries. The results of their study concluded that 41% of the men had experienced post-coital dysphoria in their lifetime, and 20% reported that they had had that happen to them in the preceding 4 weeks, and 4% said that they had suffered from it regularly. And so, the huge takeaway from that, Nick, is, holy crap, 20% of those guys got laid in the last month. Good for them.
Yeah,
At least 20% had gotten laid. That's fantastic
that's
news.
An interesting take on
really
this.
rooting for these guys. Global mankind is doing great. But no, it's fascinating because, basically the subjects would, explain that after sex, I don't want to be touched. I want to be left alone. They might feel unsatisfied, annoyed. They describe to being fidgety, wanting to leave, wanting to distract themselves. Some of them describe just being emotionless and sort of empty in the aftermath. And it's really interesting because, what the researchers had pointed out was that we know from other research that post-coital sex, so after you've, had your orgasms, the resolution phase is usually considered very important for building intimacy in the relationship. And usually we see that couples that engage in talking or kissing or cuddling after sex, they usually report greater sexual and relationship satisfaction. So this research, I think, is really meaningful because we know that already about humans, that in post-sex, we want to see them cuddling or talking or kind of relating and being close. But here we're seeing that 41% of the men surveyed are basically indicating, listen, at some point in my sexual career, I have experienced this post-coital dysphoria where I want to be left alone. I feel emotionless. I feel disconnected. I'm fidgety. I feel unresolved. I kind of need to do something or get away from you, which is a fascinating study. It's the first time men have ever been measured in this. But I think that that's really fair. I'm not super shocked to see this data. I feel like I know a lot of men who have said this, and I've met a lot of females who have said, I'm worried about my relationship because he pulls away after sex and, I kind of feel used, or I feel like, we're not close. And I think a lot of relationships can relate to that.
Yeah, I think so, probably. I mean, I guess the good news is that it's only 4% where it happens regularly. Right. I mean, so 20%
have had it happen at some point.
Right. But I guess what I'm saying is that if it's a committed relationship and it's somebody that they've had experience with for several years,
right.
Or, then it's not like it's happening all the time.
Right.
It may happen once or twice, and that probably decreases the effect that it has on the relationship because it's kind of more of an isolated incident than it is a commonplace.
That's a good point. And one of the things I think is really important about the study, though, is I've met a lot of females in private practice, or you're doing couples counseling, who will bring this up and will say, there are times when we'll have sex and he seems to pull away. He seems to be disinterested. I feel used, basically. He has sex and then he kind of gets up and now he's got to go check his email, or, he's going to go downstairs and make a sandwich, or he wants to go watch a show, and he pulls away from me when I kind of want to keep the lights off and just talk and have some quiet time with each other. And a lot of females have described, feeling a little detached and, feeling a bit used. I think this is important data because it kind of demonstrates that is not usually the case, that 41% of men in the study at some point have had that happen where they've pulled back. And it's not necessarily because they don't care for their mate. It's not because they confess to, I was just using her. I tossed her cab fare and I left. Like, that's not what was going on. Like, it's just post-coital dysphoria, which we now know is a common thing, at least.
Right. So do you see this as being something that is going to be treated? Did they talk about that at all?
I mean, maybe if the therapist is in the bedroom. So if you're out there, come on down to therapy.vegas. You can book Jim. Jim, we were thinking about having you over Friday night. We'll call you in when we're done. And you could do some live therapy.
Right. Well, I mean, this could be something that if it, for that 4% where this happens regularly, this could be something that could be dealt with in therapy, possibly. Working on some coping skills, working on just basically how you would treat dysphoria in any other sense.
Right.
Right. But I also think that there might be, some compounding variables here, which is just the chemical reaction going on in the brain post-sex and how that affects pleasure and happiness.
In another episode recently, you talked about the dopamine cycle, and you had talked about how the brain really rewards anything that would increase the survival value of the species, right? So
Right.
eating is good and sex is very, very good, right? And I think that there's a measure of this when I think about post-coital dysphoria. I'm not super duper surprised because I think that there's this explosion of dopamine that's happening
Sure.
in your body. And I think that is such a significant amount of chemical that I'm not surprised that there's another side of the graph, that the spike goes up and maybe drastically comes down. And for some people, they may report dysphoria. I think a lot of guys talk about, being tired or something after sex.
Yeah.
That's not surprising.
I guess I was thinking when we're talking about the rush of dopamine and then the sudden plunge, that's kind of like me when I get all excited about pizza and I have one slice and then I go back for more, then I realize that everybody else has finished it and there's no more pizza left. And then that's that dysphoria that I experienced, that that plunge and that disappointment.
So I don't mean to shrink
and then
you,
I just
but-
want to be left alone.
Yeah.
I don't want to cuddle. I don't want to cuddle. You can't comfort me.
I'm just going to
leave me alone.
Yeah. And masturbate with my pizza. Wait, did I misunderstand? I feel like I was following you. Maybe I was wrong. And now we have to mark this episode explicit. But no, I think that, it's actually, this study, Nick, is not, the takeaway is not 4% of men. The takeaway is almost half of men have had the experience.
At some point, yeah.
And 20% recently had the experience. And 4% are always having the experience.
Right.
So I think it's a huge thing because, if you're a couple out there and you have noticed this, if you're a man listening or you're a woman listening and you've noticed in yourself or in your mate that they tend to be sort of disenchanted and pull away and just seem quiet or emotionless or irritated with you, right after, there's so many jokes that come to mind as I say that last sentence. I can think of so many, so I think that there's truth to this, but if you're out there and you resonate with that and you say, you know what, I've noticed this in myself, or I've noticed this in my mate, one piece of advice that I would give you on the practical side is I think that Nick, if I was doing further research on this, I'd be really curious to know what were the status of those relationships. Do we see this in one-night stands? Do we see this in casual relationships? Do we see this in long-term relationships? Because my advice to the listener is going to be, if you've noticed this in yourself, I think that you need to consider adding more to your evening. For a lot of couples, they're going to have a couple glasses of wine and, they're going to get in the mood or whatever and they're going to have their sex, and that's fine. But then sometimes they don't have anything planned afterward. And so now it's done. And so there is nothing left. And if somebody is susceptible to post-coital dysphoria, I think that may set a stage for them to really experience it. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of couples, I think, are more successful when they have more to their evening. They say, let's rent a movie or let's do something afterward. And they kind of plan all that. Or they're going to grab, some delivery or something. They're going to eat afterward, have something else to look forward to. But I think if you pack your night with a few more chapters, it can interfere a little bit with maybe that post-coital dysphoria because there's something else to look forward to. And we can maybe get that dopamine moving again.
Possibly. I mean, and I guess we'd want to look at, what's causing this? Where is this stemming from? Because if this is being caused by something chemical in the brain, then maybe having a behavioral approach to treating it isn't really going to be very effective.
Good point. Yeah. And there's not a lot you can do.
Right.
Who knows? But I'm not sure that there's necessarily a way to medicate or treat it. But I'm curious, for couples that are trying to just kind of weather this to make sure it doesn't interfere with their sex lives or their relationship. If this has happened to you, I encourage you to really learn from this study that it's not you, and that's the big takeaway is that a lot of people probably think it's them, or they think, God, how bad was this? How bad is my sex? How bad is my sex game that you're just pulling away from me or you don't want to talk to me? It probably has nothing to do with you. What this study tells us is that almost half of men, 40% of men at some point have experienced this. And our best guess for why is biological and biochemical. It probably has nothing to do with you.
Right.
So I think that's a positive takeaway. But so if you're out there and you'd like to know more about post-coital dysphoria, definitely don't Google that. I don't want to know what comes out. But right into the show. Tell us about your experiences, and we'll try to do our best to give you our practical advice about your post-sex sadness and how to cheer up.
Yes, we definitely want to hear about that.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm hoping to hear about every week.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we look at some work tips. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Do you hate ads in podcasts? So do we. That's why there aren't any in Pod Therapy. But eventually, we'd like to fill this ad space with short messages from real listeners who help sponsor the show. So, start thinking about what message you'd want here. Maybe we'll read it. Maybe you can leave a voicemail and we'll play that. Either way, Pod Therapy wants to be listener-driven, listener-supported, and we hope that you'll think about filling this space with a personal message for the rest of the listeners. Thank you so much for listening. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our first listener mail comes to us from Maddie, who I believe is the president of our fan club in Nashville, and she wants some tips for the job market.
Okay, work tips needed. How do I find the right job for me? Hey guys, love the show. In a previous episode, you answered a question and gave some advice on annual work reviews and getting ahead. I'm currently looking for a new job, but it's been a while since I've had to build a resume, apply, interview, etc. I have so many questions. First off, how do you figure out what career you should have? Like, big picture in life, what field you should go into? Next, I have more practical questions. What kind of resumes do you recommend? Do you have any suggestions of do's or don'ts? Are some job websites better than others? How can I stand out during the application process? Is there any way to improve my odds of getting an interview? When I do an interview, what should I wear and what should I say? What do I do when I am asked about my salary requirements? Do you have any advice on how to follow up and make sure I get the job? I love your show and share it with everybody I know. Thanks in advance for the advice. Maddie.
Thank you, Maddie, and thank you for being the president of our Nashville chapter of our fan club, and good luck on your job search. Nick, how did you know that you wanted to go into psychotherapy? Her first question is, big picture, how do you find your career? How do you find your field or the thing you're going to do? What stood out for you in your life that made you realize, I want to do this?
I still don't know.
I was just so utterly unqualified for everything.
Everything else just didn't fit. No, I mean, for me, it was something that I never. I was about to say I never really pictured myself being a therapist, but that's not true because I remember even in second grade imagining having a job where I worked with kids in school and did counseling and just helped them deal with problems. I didn't really know what a therapist was
in second grade.
At that time.
You kind of thought about, I'd like to help other kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I don't.
Were you like Lucy from Peanuts? Like, did you have your little lemonade stand that said psychiatric help?
Well,
5 cents?
That's what's so funny is like I had no idea what a therapist was. I didn't know anything about it, and then I just kind of forgot about it. Right, and then I've said on the podcast before that when I went to college, I actually was a finance major to start with.
Yeah,
and it wasn't until I took an intro to psych class that I just found it really interesting, and that was the subject that I wanted to read more about, and it didn't seem like work when I was in school learning about it. It just seemed like something I would be doing anyway. So then that's when I kind of figured, okay, this is the direction I need to be going in. Now, once I've got that narrowed down, it's still pretty wide because there's, as you know, with these degrees or being a therapist, there's a lot of different things you can do with it. Right now, I'm in a position where I'm not actually doing clinical work anymore. I work for an organization that provides technical assistance and training to agencies that do substance abuse treatment, and I love it.
You review clinical work, right? So another program may be on the front line treating the patient. Now you're in a place where you come in and sort of troubleshoot what they're doing to make sure it's ethical, that it's doing good work, and that you're getting results in your treatment.
Yeah, so there's an auditing component to it, but then there's also the teaching and training component too, where it's kind of our job to help them out and provide technical assistance and get them to where they need to be. So that, for me, it's kind of a shift in my job, but I really enjoy it. It's still really exciting.
And it's still within the major field that you ended up choosing.
Right. I'm still with, it didn't do a big career change, right?
Okay. So you never took a personality test or something that, our guidance counselor sat you down and said, do this.
But there is that one test that people have talked about before where it's like, if you get asked, okay, you've just won the lottery, you never have to work again, what do you do?
Right.
And however you answer that question
tells us a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction, and that it may not be exactly what your job should be, but it points you in the direction of what you should be doing.
It's funny because I remember I was in this high school program and they asked that question to all the students in the room and they said, okay, you've been given, $10 billion. What's your plan? What do you do with it? And the goal was that we were all supposed to imagine being entrepreneurs or something like that. And one kid, who's my favorite kid, I love this dude, he said, all right, the first thing I'm going to do is buy a senator. We're just like, what? He's like, I'm gonna bribe a senator and I'm gonna create a coalition, and like he had this whole master plan basically for global domination. And it's funny because fast forward, that guy ended up getting into politics. He's actually,
No way.
Yes, he works in Nevada as like a consultant. It's so crazy, but yeah, his answer is buy a senator. So yeah, I can see that. I think for me, when I was so I actually studied religion. And, it's ironic because whenever you said that you were doing finance, but then you studied psychology and it felt like you wanted to know more about it, you didn't feel like it would work anymore. You felt like, I'm just curious. This is what I want to read about. That's how I felt about religion. At the time, it was really meaningful for me. I enjoyed learning about the history. I enjoyed studying ancient languages. I enjoyed literary criticism and like learning how to like come in and kind of try to translate and understand these original Greek and Latin texts and like how does that apply and what did it mean in that historical context and what's sort of the history of this, religious group and how did they evolve over time and, so all that kind of stuff. And I appreciated the cultural aspects of it. For me, learning about religion was something I enjoyed so much that it didn't feel like it was hard work. And I've met a lot of college students who are really struggling because they're sophomore year or something like that, and they're trying so hard to learn their degree and get through it, but it's really hard because they're not passionate about it. And so my usual advice is, like you're saying, first start with something you're passionate about, right? Which is ironic because I'm usually the practical guy that's like, no, I don't care if you're passionate. Computer science pays great money. Go learn that.
Right.
Go be an x-ray tech. It pays great money. I don't care if you're passionate about it. Go learn a skill,
Yeah.
So I also agree with that. But whenever I work with people, no matter how old they are, who are interested in trying to pursue a career, figure out their path, I usually refer them to a website. And so there's this website called ONET, O-N-E-T. And ONET is a publicly funded program that basically does career development. And you can take something called the ONET Career Interest Profiler. And if you take this test, it will be a personality test, and it asks you questions like, hey, right now, if your buddy called you and asked you to help him install cabinets, or you had to finish up an essay, which of those would you rather do right now? And it's just yes or no kind of questions, either ors. But then it scores you in different personality profiles, 5 different elements of your personality, and then it says, okay, people that have these personality traits tend to end up in these careers. And then it will take that list of careers and it will divide it into 5 different zones, with zone 1 being like you could start this career tomorrow, and zone 5 being like, hey, you'd need tons of education and training to do this. What's really cool is then ONET has it listed so you can take that career and then you can plug it into the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so BLS.gov, and there's something called the Occupational and Operations Handbook, the OOH, inside of the BLS.gov. And so you can pull up this handbook, you can type in a job. So let's say you take the test and plumber comes up. You go, okay, interesting. I've heard of plumbers, but I don't know much about it. Okay, great. Type plumber into the BLS.gov, the OOH handbook, and it will pull up this like profile page for plumbers, and it will show you across the country, here's their employment rate, here's how much money they make in each state, and here's like a video interviewing one of them, asking what a day in their life is like, here's all the training you would need to do it, here's the licenses in your state. It's fantastic. So that's like a really good way to like do searching and soul searching and investigating to figure out what kind of career you might want to have. And it's practical, but it's also passion driven. That way you kind of have a personality approach to it too.
Right. Well, one piece of feedback I'd give you, Maddie, don't stress so much about finding the perfect career, especially if you're young, because
absolutely,
there's a lot of life left. I know a lot of people who started off in one career and they loved it, but then they just kind of got tired of it and they wanted to do a career change.
Right.
And they go into something completely different. And people do it all the time.
Right.
But I also know a lot of young people get really stressed about that idea. And they think like, well, I've got all this student loan debt now, and I've committed to this, and I can't change now, otherwise I feel like I'm just going to be wasting my degree.
Right.
Well,
And there could be
happiness.
logic to that.
Yeah, sure, there's logic to it.
Yeah.
I definitely agree there's logic to it, but your happiness means something too.
Well,
your happiness has...
The core of what I hear you saying is don't let perfect get in the way of better, right?
Absolutely.
Or progress.
Yeah.
Like, don't let best prohibit better, or
Yeah.
perfect get in the way of progress. So, like, pursue something. And it goes back to that old adage of, what is it? A ship at sail is easier to steer than a ship in the harbor. Right? So it's better if you're just under momentum.
Yeah, and you may get into a career and you got your BA in accounting or
Right.
and you got an art degree or something like that, and you're not using it. You want to change careers and go into something else, so maybe you go back to school. It's fine. I don't believe in a wasted degree.
No, I don't either.
I think anything that you learn, I think, can be valuable.
Yeah.
In multiple fields.
And if for no other reason, it opens up grad school if that's something that you want to do because your profession may require that. So, like, to Nick's point, I am the perfect example of everything you just described. Right. So when I graduated high school, I went to college and just took general studies for a little bit. I realized I really enjoyed religion and I thought I wanted to be a minister. So I studied religion. I got a bachelor's degree in religion. I ended up taking that and teaching at a Christian school and being a small church pastor here in town. And so that was my gig. That was my career. I did that for like 8 years. And then, ironically, at that school I was teaching at, I was the guidance counselor too. It was like a small school. And so I had my students take a personality test online, like the one I just described. Mm-hmm. And one of them said, dude, you've never taken one of these. And I was like, oh, I'll take it just for, fun. And it said, you should be, in therapy. You should be a therapist. And I was like, well, that sounds
It said you should be in therapy.
That's
and
right.
You misunderstood.
Yeah, I misunderstood and became a therapist. Yeah, it said, you should go to therapy right now. But no, it's funny because I saw that and I was like, well, yeah, that would be awesome. I enjoy that part of what I do. Like, that'd be great. And then I typed it up and learned how to do it. I went and got the phone number of a therapist in town. I sat with him, had coffee, asked him what his life was like, realized, oh my gosh, I really want to do this. And then I took my bachelor's in religion and used it to get into grad school to get a master's in marriage and family therapy. So I agree with you. I think that I'm an example of that. I was 8 years in one career and then I pivoted and went into behavioral health. So anybody can change. But finding what you want to be is a big thing. I think always ask family, always ask people in your life that know you best what they imagine you doing because they know you pretty well. But let's talk a little bit more about the practical side of it, Nick. So, when it comes to resumes, when it comes to interviewing skills, when it comes to that dreaded question, how much money am I supposed to pay you? All that stuff. You've had a lot of employees in life and you've had to look at a lot of resumes and interview a lot of people. Is there a type of resume that you've learned you hate or a type of resume that you've appreciated? Like, are there any patterns that you've come to enjoy or kind of loathe as an employer who's interviewing people?
I don't know as if there's any particular resumes that would stand out to me. I was never one that would really look at, what kind of paper is it on, or anything like that.
And a lot of them are digital now.
Right. I mean, I remember when I first started, everybody had paper resumes and you hand delivered them, and so you wanted resume paper.
Yeah.
And, people would put it, I had blue resume paper at one point. It was kind of a light sky blue, but you wanted to do something that would kind of make it stand out a little bit. Now resumes are all kind of the same.
Yeah.
There are some that will stand out to me if they put, it's like this weird threshold, this weird kind of middle ground that you have to hit where it looks like you put some effort into it.
Right.
But you didn't go overboard.
Too much.
Right?
Yeah,
you didn't try to fluff it up too much. But the thing that I look for in a resume is I really look for hard facts.
Yes.
Where have you worked?
Yes.
What experience do you have? What special skills do you have? How are you going to contribute to this organization?
And it better sound like you've looked up the organization. If you're coming in and you're gearing all of your skills toward another place and it's like you didn't even look at us, did you just spam me your resume?
Yeah, let me point out a couple things as far as interviewing. Because I'm probably better with the interview part than I am with feedback on the resume.
Hold on. Before we pivot to interview, because I agree. I think you are a way better interviewer. I was usually the gatekeeper. I was usually the guy that looked at the resumes and then you would schedule the interview and follow up with them.
Right.
So I'll throw out, because I have a lot of pet peeves when it comes to, oh my God. All right. So I'm going to just machine gun fire this. And if you're out there taking notes, just write as fast as you can and then replay this entire segment because, oh my God, I have a lot of thoughts. First thing, always have a cover letter. Cover letter needs to be designed to the specific place that you are trying to apply to, not to your industry, not to a general, whoever. specifically needs to be addressed to the company. And I also recommend getting on their website, figuring out by name who a leader in that company is and addressing the letter to them. I just think that that's more appropriate. It shows me on the back end that you took the time to figure out who the heck we are. You want our money, so I would hope that it matters enough to you that you would show us the respect to figuring out what we do, use buzzwords that come off of our website that show me that you're aware of what we are. So cover letter's key, gotta do that. When it comes to the resume, I'm with Nick. I don't like fluff. So I'm comfortable with you writing a very short paragraph at the top that says like profile and like tells me a little bit about you. I've lived in the state for this long and I'm passionate, or, I'm a good speaker, or I have a lot of business experience, whatever. That's fine. Keep that brief, because that stuff's unverifiable. That's just your opinion about you, and I would hope you like yourself. So that doesn't mean a lot to me. But get right to the point. And I like, there's a big debate out there about should it be a one-page resume, or should you really have like a profile? I've always been a fan of the one-page resume. Like, I like to look at it and see education, experience, professional background, credentials and licenses, and then, special awards recognition, and then references. Like, get it all out, put it in bullet points. It should be easy for my eye to follow. And on that point, just a little fun technical aside, you better always have a resume that is designed in a PDF. So you open it in Word, you design it, and then you export as a PDF, and that is your resume. Never send somebody a resume in a doc or in some open office format. Like, that is dumb. Like, you need to put it in a PDF. That is the language of business. And also, you have control over that because you know what I'm gonna see. And if you can, I'm a big fan of putting some kind of profile picture in there, a professional headshot, something that and don't make it huge, just put it somewhere in a corner, but it makes you stand out, because if your name is, Timothy, Newhart, and then I look at there, and now I have a face, like, okay, now I know you're a human, and just like, you've hacked into my brain a little bit faster than the rest of the people who didn't stand out. So, couple of little pointers there. I believe in brevity. I believe in getting it to the point. I believe in a little bit of fluff, but not much. Just enough to get your personality. Always have a cover letter, always PDF, try to get a picture in there. And I get angry if you put too much fluff. Like, I'll stop reading. But a little bit of fluff when it comes to like your last job or jobs you've had. Tell me your duties. Like, what was your day to day, so that I can have a feel for it. I think that's key too. But, I'm also a big fan of having multiple versions of your resume. Because like in what you just described, you could be employed as a therapist, you could be employed as a leader of therapists, you could be employed as somebody who oversees organizations, you could also be employed as somebody who polices those organizations. Even though those are very similar, there's different parts of your professional profile that are accentuated toward those jobs. It's best to have several versions of your resume that sort of play to each one of those audiences. That way they're reading the version of you that most stands out to them as something they would like to work with. So anyway, when it comes to resume stuff, those are my little, nuggets of wisdom to take with you. Multiple versions and all that other stuff. Now, once they've gotten through the door, and now here they are interviewing with you, Nick tends to do more interviewing stuff. What are some of your, ideas on that?
Well, first of all, I think you're always going to do better in an interview when you know the person who's interviewing you. This isn't always going to be an option, but in any case that it is, get out and network. Get to know who else is in the field. If I'm doing an interview for a therapist position and I've met this person, I've seen them out in the community, we've been at meetings together, and I at least can match a face with a name, I feel more comfortable with that person.
Yeah.
Right? So as much as you can, do that. Number two, I would agree definitely with the resume and tailoring your resume towards that agency, and be prepared to do that in the interview as well.
Right.
One of the questions that I always start off an interview with, tell me what you know about us.
Oh, that's right. I've seen you do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've known some people
It's hilarious because people think it's a trap. And it's like, dude,
right.
You came here.
Yeah.
I hope you Googled us.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of interviews that I've done where the person said, yeah, not really. I don't really know what you do.
Yeah, but I'd like your money, please.
Yeah. So then at that point, I'm kind of like, okay, well,
thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming. That's about it. Because that really shows that you're putting out so many resumes that you're willing to take whatever job you can get, as opposed to, I want to come work here because I like your philosophy.
Right.
I've looked at your website. I've seen what you do. I know some of the people who work here. I've heard really good things. I feel like what you are doing is in line with what I want to do.
Yes.
I want to work for you.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear.
And what you just said, I would hope that if you're going out for an interview, guys, rehearse, okay? Don't trust that you're going to show up and on that big day of pressure, you're going to totally deliver that line. You need to have your friend or your spouse or somebody do a fake interview with you. I think you should always do that. And practice regurgitating some of that data and saying, you know what? I looked at your website. I really enjoy your company. I've heard great things about you in the community, blah, 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 but say something.
And there's only one other pet peeve that I have regarding the interview process.
Is it when they don't wear pants?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
No. And this may just be me. This may just completely be my pet peeve. When I'm doing an interview and someone describes themselves as being old school, the interview's done. I'm no longer interested in that person. Because here's the thing, like, especially in our industry, old school basically means, I do things the way that the hard way, like being tough and being mean and how we used to do it back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then you're of no use to me.
Yeah, because it's not the 80s.
And I don't know if this is, maybe some of this translates into other fields or other disciplines, but to me, the reason why there is an old school is because there's a new school.
Yeah, yeah.
Through science and through evidence-based practices, we have identified new, better, more efficient ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And if somebody comes in and in their interview they say, I'm old school, what you're really telling me is, I don't keep up with the new stuff.
Yeah. I'm outdated.
I am obsolete to you. I am no good to you.
I think that, I'm not sure if it would apply to tons of other industries, but, on that note, other things that are like obvious pet peeves that I don't like hearing in an interview. Yes, tell me about yourself. Yes, broadcast your confidence. Let me know that you're good at this. But one of the smartest things you can do, guys, and this gets back to the psychology of interviewing, ask questions. Interview the interviewer.
Yeah, always have questions.
It increases their oxytocin level in their brain as they're talking to you, because the more comfortable they feel in your presence, because you're warm and you're asking them questions and they're sharing about things that they enjoy or sharing about their company. And then if you can respond verbally and non-verbally as being enthusiastic and, oh, that's great. Yeah, I really love that philosophy. Or, yeah, I've heard that about you guys. That's awesome. You've really achieved a lot in your first year or whatever. By doing that, you're giving them these little bursts of oxytocin in their brain. And that oxytocin is the love chemical. And so they start thinking, like, I really like this guy.
No,
That's
don't overdo it.
Don't overdo it.
Because we talked about that a couple episodes back.
But enthusiasm's a good idea. It's better than coming in cold.
Yeah, enthusiasm, being able to say, like, I really admire all the things that you do here. I feel like I can learn a lot, but I also feel like I can contribute.
Yes. Coming in, managing that delicate razor's edge of being kind of humble, but also sort of but competent and capable of taking a load off their shoulders. I think that that's huge, but I really like the idea of asking them questions, making them feel comfortable. That's the real goal. You're really just auditioning of whether or not you're a real human being who seems like you belong in that place. And this goes to a few more little hacks. So one of my favorite hacks, always meet the secretary. Whoever's at the front, whoever's the greeter, whoever's the person that's the front door of that place, meet that person, memorize their name, exchange a few sentences with them, be casual, but get them to the place where they kind of liked you. And because that's what always happens is after you leave, that person matters in your life.
Yes.
Because that interviewer might ask what, they thought of you. That's really important. That person, that secretary may come back and go, hey, I really liked so-and-so. What happened with that one? That's huge because now you're getting social support from the exact place you're trying to work at. And after an interview, you may need to call back in a couple of days and find out what your status is, because they don't always proactively let you know what's going on. They can get lost in their own HR stuff. That secretary is meaningful. You hope that person remembers you. That receptionist is going to be important. So when you call in, they go, oh yeah, Bob, I remember you. You were great. You know what, Bob? Let me go find out. So-and-so's walking through the hall right now. Let me go ask him what the deal is. Let me give you a call back. And so, I really believe in just the human side of it, using the interview process as your opportunity to get those relationships going quick and be very natural. That's the most important thing you bring to the interview is a sense of, persona and being warm and approachable and easy to get along with. That is key, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. So what would you say to her question about the salary requirements?
Okay.
Somebody, you're doing an interview,
Yeah.
and they ask you, Jim, what are your salary requirements?
Right. Oh, my gosh. All right. So I hope this never comes back to bite me that somebody's interviewing with me and they use this against me.
No one listens to this podcast.
Nobody listens to this podcast. We'll be safe. Anybody that's listening to this podcast will not interview with us. Okay. Here's the deal. Here's the hack to this. Never lead. Never give a number first. I'm a firm believer in that. Some people will say, give a number, make it the highest number. That way you're starting the conversation at the high end. And there is a rule that you can do that, but you have to have a very clear understanding of what you should be making. So my very first comment on this is, you better have a really good understanding of how much you should be earning or what is possible. You need to know within 10 grand what the range should be. And so I recommend going to Glassdoor.com. Glassdoor is a job website, but it also tells you what everybody makes, and people self-report so that they can analyze their own data and figure out if they're making enough. So always check with that. Also, go to Indeed. Indeed.com is a great place to look for jobs. But what's really great about Indeed is you can sign up as an employer, and then you can go through people's resumes. So then you can type in the keywords that you're searching for to look for a job from the employer side and see what all the other applicants are saying and what they can do and what their resumes look like. So now you can cheat and see what the employer sees. So now you can frame your resume to outcompete those people's or to be good and similar to them. But you can also get a feel for what they were probably making because you can see.
Idea.
I'm good at this, man.
And slightly manipulative.
Oh, very. Yeah. Beat the game.
But
it's
good.
your career, man. It's your livelihood. Like, this is your money. It matters. It's very manipulative, but I totally think if it's out there, take advantage of it. Get a feel for what these jobs pay. And if you know what is the average going rate for this job, there's two ways I think you could approach that question of how much money you want to make. Option A, you want to come in at the highest number that is reasonable. Now, you're playing a dangerous game because I have had people apply for me that have come in with that highest possible number. And there have been times when I've thought, you know what, I don't want to work with them because I think, well, I don't want to pay that much. And I know that I could get the next interview that's going to come in will settle for $5,000 less.
Or you, if it's way out of the ballpark, then you're just thinking, well,
then it's
they're
silly.
They're completely ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's why the first thing you got to do is
Right.
recon. If you come in with a dumb answer,
Yeah.
we've got a problem. Like, I've stopped doing it. I ended up designing an application at one point in my career that I required people to tell me, how much do you want to make? And, but here's the thing. Option A, you can come in and highball them. And there's a philosophy that says you should do that because it starts the conversation at that side of the scale, and they feel odd backing away from that too far. They'll feel like it's disrespecting you, or that, you know, obviously you must be confident that you deserve that much. And so, you know, it's weird to pull you down much further than that. And then you prepare yourself to let them talk you down about $5,000 or whatever. So let's say you come in and say, I want to make $40,000 a year. And they say, oh, okay, well, this position we were thinking more like 35, accept, right? If the range is 30 to 40 and you came in with 40 and they talk you down to 35, accept, like, that's fine. Or you can come back and cut it in half again and say, how about 37? You know, and so, like, there's always a way to do that. Now, that's one school of thought. I have friends that have done that. I think that there's reason to that. My school of thought is usually don't be the first one to come in with a number. To usually come in and say, you know what? I'm listening. I don't like people writing down numbers. I as an employer, I like it because it gives me the power. But if you're an applicant, don't write the number and don't tell them how much you want to make, and don't confess how much you made at your last job. The way that you can frame it is, listen, you know how much you're going to spend on this role. You know what the value is to your company, to your organization. You know your budget. So, you know what? I'll let you let me know. What do you believe the value is? And when you're ready, send me an offer and I'll have to review that with you. And the reason I think that that's better is because I think it pushes the employer to have to be careful about how they're going to phrase it, because it makes them double, triple think. And when I've been pushed into that position where I have to think about what number I'm going to throw out, I tend to go a little bit higher because I'm taking the time to write you an offer. We've gotten to the point where I want to propose employment to you. So now I kind of want to spear the fish. Like, I'm not trying to play games. So I'm usually going to come at the person and say, all right, here's my real number. Now, once you get that number, another strategy that I believe is an advantage to making them give you the number first is that's the first number proposed. So now the conversation can happen. They started it. If you have 30 numbers that you've passed back and forth, it can get exhausting and they can get sick of you. But if they start the conversation, they say, okay, 35 grand. Now you can counter and say 37 or 40 and let them come to 37. You can say, well, I was really looking for 40. And they can say, all right, how about 37? But another thing I want to tell people is when you're having that salary conversation, I want you to lean into the discomfort of this. It is not fun. Most people do not enjoy having that talk. Most people just want to get it done and get to work. This is when I want you to have that debate. And here's why. Because a year from now, after you get hired, 2 years from now, after you get hired, you're going to be hoping for a raise. You, per capita, get a lot more money at the beginning of the relationship than you do at the check-in. So if you're looking for a $5,000 increase, you're more likely to get that at the beginning negotiation than a year in. You're usually going to get a percentage increase a year in, or a raise increase is never as much as a role change or the beginning negotiation. So let's say you're trying to get $5,000 on top of the offer. Ask yourself, am I more likely to get them to raise my salary $5,000 in a year, or can I negotiate that now? My argument is do it now, because I think that when you look on balance at the statistics, you're more likely to get $5,000 added to your salary in the beginning than you are a year from now. It's just more likely. Usually you get a percentage of that.
Well, a lot of that has to do also with where you're at currently,
yes,
financially and with job security. I mean,
right.
if you've already got a good job and you're just looking at switching over to another company,
right.
well, you've got a lot of negotiating power. That's because right. You can always stay where you're at.
Yes, always appear strong. Like if they ask you, what are you doing right now? And the answer is unemployed. Find a way to massage that. That way you can say it differently. Like, oh, I've been doing some contracting work, or I've been doing, I have a side business that I've been working on, or some personal projects I've been doing. Find a way to kind of massage it. Cause you're right, Nick. If you come in and say, no, nobody else wants me. Will you give me top dollar? No, they won't. They know how supply and demand works. So.
Right.
But, that I think is my two methods for how I would tackle the salary thing. Be polite about it. Be professional about it. The stupidest thing you could ever do is be disrespectful during that time, or appear offended, or, seem dumb. That's how you turn somebody off, because it's awkward for both of you. Neither of you is looking forward to that part of the conversation. They want to know if they can afford your services within a reasonable way to run their company. You want to know if you can afford to live while working here.
Right. Respect is always key, because people talk within the industry.
Yes.
And the next place that you go to apply, if you left the last place disrespectfully, it's not uncommon that I get a phone call from one of my cohorts at another agency, and they will say, hey, do you know so-and-so? They just applied for a job.
And you have to kind of choose your words.
You got to be very careful.
You might grimace, legally, and they're like, oh, you don't need to say anything. Yeah. Like, I can kind of read your face, and right. I'm not feeling this. But anyway, hey man, you're going to make it. The most important thing is to get out there and mix it up. And the biggest thing I've seen people do that's the biggest mistake is the fear of failure. Apply for everything, but take your time. Do it the right way. Don't just smash the apply button on websites. Get the Indeed app. I think that's my favorite one. I think it's a really good one. But don't just spam everybody. Always tailor, custom make a cover letter, and do your best for each one, but don't be afraid to try.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, should you wear your wedding ring? This should be fun. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Hey Therapals, have you purchased your tickets to ScoopFest 2018 yet? Our friends Matt, Paul, and Jacob are working hard putting together their third annual weekend-long comedy and podcast festival in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, October 12th through the 14th. Enjoy live comedy, variety shows, the Scoop Talent Show, the Jock vs. Nerd Costume Ball, and much, much more, including live recordings of Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social, Pod Therapy, Penn Sunday School, the Piff Pod, and a whole bunch of other, I'm sure, your favorite podcasts. And guess what? Our listeners get $40 off their ticket price. Just go to heyscoops.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our next listener writes in asking whether it's okay that his wife is not wearing her wedding ring. I'm upset my wife won't wear her wedding ring. I spent months saving money to get her a ring which was custom made. I made sure that it was something she wanted and something she would be proud of. I got it costume made up in New York, perfect for her in every way. I hijacked her Pinterest account, which she forgave me for. She said previously that she only wanted a single ring, like engagement ring, and not a wedding ring through our whole relationship. It turns out that she actually wanted a wedding ring, though. No big deal. It didn't fit her engagement ring initially, but we got it worked on and now it fits. More money, but well worth it. It's what she wanted. Fast forward 4 months after the wedding. She never wears her ring, and hasn't even changed her last name. I bring it up, and she shrugs it off as this or that, says she's too busy, which she's not. It came to a bust tonight when we were out with one of her girlfriends, and her girlfriend called her out and says that she never wears her wedding ring. It made me feel like crap. Here I am wearing mine, caring about it, and she's not meeting me halfway, especially in front of everyone, our friends. It's symbolic, and even though it doesn't mean everything, it's only a ring, it still makes me feel like she's not putting in the effort. She wanted all of this and doesn't even try. And it just feels like I picked out my ring and I bought it myself. She didn't try, and she's not a part of this. I take mine off for a night and she calls me out on it. Apparently it's important to her that I wear mine, but it's not important that she wear hers. I confronted her now, and she says that she's just going to start wearing it. But now it feels forced. I want it to be something she wants to wear, but now it's there because I want it, which doesn't feel the same. It's such a stupid reason to be mad, but it's upsetting to me, and she's making it feel like I can't be upset about this. It's a small fight, but it makes me feel really weird and terrible. Am I over-exaggerating the circumstance, or do I have something to be upset about? What should I do?
Yes. I think to all of that. I mean, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't necessarily say it's over-exaggerating the circumstance, but I think this is a great point to something that I say all the time, which is that it's not the event that causes an emotional reaction. It's the meaning behind the event. Right. It's what it means to us. And this is very important because things mean different things to different people, right? So something may be very symbolic to me, and maybe it was my culture or the way I was raised, but something is very important to me, and I just assume that it has the same level of importance and significance to everybody else. Right. So then when I see somebody else not doing this, then to me, it's, well, that's disrespectful. That's rude. How can that,
how do they not? Yeah.
How do they not? Yeah. And then it leads to my discomfort and my emotions, my feelings, whereas that person is probably doesn't really think twice about it.
Right.
Now, that being said, the writer writes in about, well, when I don't wear mine, it's a big deal to her.
Yeah.
So that is a little bit different. So that's not necessarily just a difference in what something means. There seems to be a lot more going on behind the scenes. This seems to be like this is more than just a ring.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Here's another thought to that, though. So what I read in this is she has an engagement ring, and then we've additionally added a wedding ring. And I know some women will get those two fused together, and so that they're a matching set,
right?
And then it's kind of a double ring. And then for some women, they have their engagement ring, and then they put on their wedding ring, they take off their engagement ring, or they wear both. What's interesting about this, he doesn't probably have an engagement ring. He probably only has his wedding ring. So if he doesn't wear it, that's it. He has a naked finger on his left hand. For her, I'm reading that she does wear the engagement ring, but not the really nice wedding ring that they got made together. So I don't think that she's flagging, I'm single, I'm available, I'm ready to party. I think that he's like, why aren't you wearing your wedding ring, which is really nice. We spent money on it. It matters. And you also haven't changed your last name, and your friends are kind of giving you crap and saying, why don't you wear your really nice ring that this dude took the time and got for you and like really put his heart into? Why aren't you wearing it? So I suspect, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I suspect that she does have a ring. And again, I only know this because, I'm really into like wedding magazines and wedding planning. But,
we know.
Yeah.
We know.
But I think that's the case. I think women tend to have like two rings.
Well, yeah, that's typically the case. And in most cases that I'm aware of, they fuse them together.
Yeah.
Here we are, two heterosexual white males talking about this issue, talking about wedding rings.
Hey, speak for yourself, dude. I'm killing it. Okay, I got it right.
But that's a good point. Okay, so I didn't interpret it that way. I thought she was wearing no ring at all.
I think she has an engagement ring. But the not changing the last name thing.
Okay, well,
if that's good for your, if you guys agree that you want to do that, because I know some couples don't do that anymore, but if that's something you both agree is meaningful and that's what you're going to do, and you're not doing it, that's curious.
Okay, so here's something I'd like to do. Let's take that name thing and let's put that on the back burner for a minute.
Okay.
So let's just focus on the rings. If it's the rings, if it's the case where she's wearing the engagement ring,
right,
but not wearing the wedding band,
yeah,
I guess as I read this, that's what she wanted all along.
Yeah.
So if the message was clear from the very beginning, hey, I only want one ring.
Yeah.
And then through pressure, she was forced into, no, let's get a wedding band and we'll put that on there too.
Yeah.
Then I understand why she might be taking it off, because that's not what she wanted from the very beginning. She was pretty clear that this isn't what I want.
Yeah.
And it's hard when we only have a limited amount of information, but if that's the case, I almost kind of take her side on that, in the sense that, well, if she was clear about this from the very get-go.
It's funny because I actually really resonate with the guy on this one. And so here's like why I'm kind of with him. I'm on Team Dude, which is probably predictable. But okay, so when I married my wife, I was 19 or 20 when I proposed. I had no money, okay? So I got her first ring at the cheapest possible place you could ever get, and it was really, really bad.
Was it a Canardly diamond?
I'm not sure, but it was cubic zirconia.
No, because you can hardly see it.
It's like a Hertz donut.
Yeah.
It's a nice Iowa joke there.
Yeah.
So, no, it was turning her finger green. Okay, so it was not a good ring. Yeah. So that was our engagement ring. Now, she had a family heirloom ring that was really important to her family, and that was going to be the wedding ring, and there was no way around it. Like, that was passed down 5 generations. That was the wedding ring. So we didn't have to think about that. So when we get married, we pick out my wedding ring. I have a matching one to her heirloom ring. So I have mine, and she has her heirloom ring. She takes off the engagement ring. Well, it kind of always bothered me because the engagement ring was like nice, and like this is her family heirloom ring. It doesn't seem to resonate like that's like I put it there, like it's mine. And I realize that's very caveman, you know, like it's not like she's my property, but it was like, well, this isn't symbolic of me, it's symbolic of your family. Like my ring is symbolic of you. You gave it to me, you know, and I wear it. And so it always bothered me, right? So fast forward, our 10th anniversary, I have money. Now I can afford to get her something really nice. And so, kind of like this guy, I went and I took the time. Like, I studied what she was into. I figured it out. I, got her all the little background details, saved up a pile of money. And for our 10th anniversary, I surprised her with this very beautiful, basically wedding ring, like engagement ring. It's worthy of that status, right? And it pairs well with her heirloom ring, all this other stuff. And here's the ring that I always thought you were worthy of, but I didn't have the money to give you. And it was this beautiful, touching moment, because she never threw away the engagement ring that turned her finger green, but you don't wear it. So I get it to her, and she's like, oh my God, it's beautiful, hems and haws over it, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, like a week and a half later, man, I've never seen that ring since. Like, it really bothers me, because I'm like, dude, I spent so much time on this and money on this, and it's symbolic. And like, I've talked to her about it. And her answer is, listen, dude, like day to day, your jewelry has to be functional. It's your day to day. Like we have kids, I'm just in a hot car and all this other stuff and like putting my hand through my hair. I don't want a ring that has diamonds on it or whatever. Like it's just not my jam. And it's frustrating because it's like, I totally get that. And if like somebody bought me a watch that was uncomfortable to wear, no matter how expensive that watch was, I'm not going to wear it. I'll wear it to nice occasions, but not, day to day. And that's how she is with the wedding ring. And I'm really frustrated because I'm like, it's in a different league. Like, and I kind of agree with this guy. I feel like it's not regular jewelry. It's not just here's a anytime gift kind of jewelry. It's symbolic jewelry. And they're at the beginning of their marriage. And it's kind of like, hey, something needs to symbolically be me with you. And like, you haven't taken my name. You're not wearing my ring. I took the time to get you a nice one. What is the deal? And so, like, I don't know. I kind of agree with the guy on this. Like, I'm not saying that she's wrong, but I'm saying I empathize with his human struggle of, like, what's going on here? Am I making a big deal out of this? And I guess my advice to the writer is, yeah, you probably are, and I certainly know I did. Like, I made too big of a deal out of it. At the end of the day, jewelry, no matter how symbolic it is, it just has to be functional. And, if she's not going to wear it because it's not functional for her wardrobe or it's not comfortable or whatever, then that's what it is, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, maybe there's more reasons to this that I'm not reading, but I think that any other piece of jewelry, you don't wonder what the reason is that they're not wearing it. But it's a wedding ring. It matters.
Yes.
It has symbolism.
Yes. Yes, it does have symbolism, but I don't know. I still don't quite, even in your example, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to side with Janelle. Damn it. Like, I think it's great. It's wonderful that you put in all the research that you didn't. I think it's great when people don't ask. Like, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people ask me, what do you want for Christmas?
Right.
Like, no, that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Like, go, you know me, do some effort, go give me something. Yeah. You know what I like, you know?
You're the worst
Otherwise, just let me, I
let everybody off the hook. I'm like, give me a gift card.
Yeah, or, well, within my family, we don't even do that anymore, because it became a gift card exchange.
Oh,
so now it's just like, you know what? I'm going to get myself something for myself.
Wow. And from you.
And you get something for you.
Wow.
We'll just do our own thing,
That's
you know?
how bad it's devolved.
Yeah, but like, I appreciate when people put in effort to go get something, and like, I noticed that you were looking at this in the store and you never really got it for yourself. So I went and I got it for you. I made the effort. That's awesome. Okay. That's really cool. Now, when you do that, occasionally you're going to strike out.
Right.
You know, you're not always going to be 100%.
When you strike out on expensive symbolic jewelry.
Yeah, well, it happens. But
we need
that's
some
the thing.
women feedback on this one.
Yeah, we do.
We really need a female to tell us, listen, I liked the ring, but here's why I don't wear it. Like, there's probably a third way that's between rejection honestly, and not caring.
I like your watch example.
Right.
Okay, what if she came from a culture where watches were symbolic of something, and a watch meant that you and I are joined.
It's
like
me.
we've got matching iWatches or smartwatches, right? Okay. So that means something to me.
Right.
But then you get it and you're like, yeah, this is cool, but I've got this other watch that I really like, and it's more me. So you start wearing that other watch. Well, she's like, but this is a symbol of our love and all that. And well, to you it is.
Yeah,
but it may not be to somebody else.
All right.
So there, and I get your point that yes, wedding rings are symbolic of something.
Yeah.
But she may be looking at this as like,
it's just jewelry.
I have a ring.
Right.
This ring is symbolic of us.
Right.
This engagement ring is symbolic of us. Why does it have to be this engagement ring and this wedding ring?
Right.
Why can't I
just taken? Who cares? Okay, I'll accept that premise, but let's now reach to the back shelf.
Okay.
Because there was a huge little nugget here. She's not changing her last name. Now, I don't hear him saying she refuses to. I hear him saying she claims that she's too busy, and it's just adding fuel to the fire. So let's step away from the question literally, and let's take this to the symbolic discussion.
Right.
What is your view on whether or not people should be changing their last name when they get married?
Don't care, as long as it was agreed upon.
Okay.
I mean, that's something that should be discussed in advance of getting married.
I sure as hell hope so.
That's not something that you want to just like spring on somebody at the end. Because that, again, that is another really good example of symbolism and how something symbolizes something to some person, but it may not have that weight or that symbolism to the other person. Okay. The other person may just say, well, yeah, but it's, you know, for one person, they may say, it's very important that my wife shares the same last name as me. But then the woman may say, but that's old, that's outdated. That doesn't have the same symbolism to me today.
Would you feel at all insecure if you marry this person and this person says, listen, I'm not taking your last name and also I'm not wearing a ring?
Yes.
You would feel a little insecure with that?
Not wearing any ring at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not taking your last name.
Yeah.
And never changes their Facebook status.
Oh, that's too far. Well, that's gone too far.
The Facebook status is the one that counts. I'll let the ring thing go. I mean, you don't even need to live in the same place with me. But by God, that Facebook status is changing.
Let's not be ridiculous.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic, though. I've seen everybody do it different ways, right? I think I actually concur with your point. Every couple gets to decide for themselves what marriage gets to look like for them, according to their culture, according to what they believe is good. There's a lot of tribalism I'm noticing where I've seen a feminist movement erupt that says, do not take his last name. It's a betrayal of values. And, I feel like that's a bit forceful. Like, I think that each individual couple ought to decide for them personally what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know for my wife, she's told me even if we ever get a divorce, she's keeping the last name because she's cool with it. It's been hers now for like over a decade. It's the name of her children and she doesn't care anymore. And so like, I was like, okay, like that's an interesting thing. So I've seen people do that. I've seen people hyphenate it, obviously. I've seen one situation where the guy took the girl's last name and they hyphenated both. So he added her last name to the hyphen and then they both adopted that new last name.
Yeah.
And then I have seen one situation where there's a woman whose last name was Sugar and she married a dude with the last name Cookies and they hyphenated that because that had to happen.
I need proof.
Oh, I'll show you. I'll show you on Facebook.
That's too perfect.
She's out there.
Sugar Cookie.
Yeah. Carly's out there. I'll show you.
Oh my God.
Unless they got a divorce. Like, that was the deal.
Sugar and Cookie separated. That'd be terrible.
Yeah. No, it can't have it. Yeah. You got to stay together for the fame.
That's awesome.
That's Good Morning America worthy. You'll get an appearance on Oprah for that.
Yeah, we need to have them on the show.
Yeah, just for that reason.
Yeah.
I don't care how uninteresting they are. So it sounds like your advice to the writer, though, is dig deeper, find out what the meaning of this is, but otherwise don't overreact.
But I wouldn't overreact. But here's the other thing, too. I do get the sense that there's more going on than...
Yeah.
Assuming she had at one point agreed, yes, I'm going to change my name. We're going to have the same last name. And she just hasn't gotten to it. And say she was, I'm okay with wearing the wedding ring, but then she just doesn't. There's more going on. There's something that she is uncomfortable with that she obviously doesn't feel comfortable enough to talk about.
Right. And you know what? I'll add one more line to this. So the other thing about this writer that's interesting is he's a rookie husband. Okay. He's brand new. And let me tell you something, rookies. Okay. This is how you learn not to buy expensive jewelry. Because here's the deal. Okay. Like, we can talk about whether or not you should do this. Get to know your mate, because if this is who they are, that they appreciate it and you get hugs and kisses because you bought them this expensive jewelry, but they're never, ever, ever going to wear it. It's going in a jewelry box for the rest of all time because they'll never pull it out and actually wear it. Think carefully about that investment. Like, should you be spending $5,000 on something that they will look at and cherish for a week and then put away? Maybe not. Like, spend $5,000 on a Carnival cruise. So think this through. Like, get to know your mate. The other thing that jumps out of this story to me is, hey man, learn from this. Not to punish her and never buy her jewelry again, but clearly that's not her love language. Like, clearly it doesn't have a lot of meaning that she wants to wear this. So don't punish her for it. Learn from it. Don't resent her for it, but learn for the future that when you want to do good for her, jewelry might not be the way that you show her affection.
Yeah. And, folks, write in. I'm interested to get everybody's take on this. I need a woman to write in on this one. Yeah, we need some...
Yeah, I need a female listener to write in and go, all right, dummies, here's how this works. Please guide us, women.
Which actually is a great segue into our next segment.
Yes.
Which is stuff we need to apologize for again.
This is our new end of show segment now.
I think this is a good way to end the show. Yeah. We just apologize for everything we said in the last show.
We just about everything in the last show and burned the episode.
Although this isn't really an apology. So, one of our listeners wrote in, and she did a pronunciation.
A phonetic. She gave us the phonetic pronunciation of her name.
Manuela.
Okay.
Manuela.
Got it.
But she did say she goes by Manu.
Okay.
Which is awesome.
Hi, Manu.
Because that's two syllables. I can handle that. Actually, she had some really interesting takes on the gaslighting that we talked about last
there was
episode.
A lot of feedback on gaslighting.
Yeah, which was good.
Good feedback.
So with the gaslighting, because here again, we were two white heterosexual males talking about a phenomenon. We had no other perspective other than our own.
Right.
I even asked...
And we didn't like the stigmatizing of it.
Right.
Like, that was our beef.
I asked Laura what she thought about it.
Your girlfriend.
And she's like, I actually just fast forward through it.
Oh, burn.
All right. That's all the feedback I needed.
The verdict is there. Oh, it hurts.
So, Manu, I'm not going to read your whole thing. She sent us a really long email, which was all great, but I'm just going to summarize it. So some important points that I got out of her email was one of the things that she talked about was the power differential that we didn't take into account.
Okay.
And I would agree with that.
So
100%.
When the person who's sort of doing the quote-unquote gaslighting has more power in the relationship, there's a danger to that.
Right. And it kind of goes back a little bit to what we had talked about as far as kind of the purpose behind it, or what's actually going on. What is their intent with the quote-unquote gaslighting?
Yeah.
And what are they trying to accomplish? So if there's a big power differential between the two, there's going to be a bigger effect. That gaslighting has a bigger effect on that person.
That's fair.
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So, and she kind of goes on to that point too, that the why is important. So the intentional act of manipulating to maintain control, that's a very important piece to this. She also agreed with that the article itself wasn't very helpful, which point of agreement there.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the power differential, one thing that I would encourage all of our listeners to take a look at, the Minnesota Duluth Power and Control Wheel.
Oh, yeah. The Minnesota Duluth Power and Control
created,
Wheel.
I think it's Minnesota Duluth. I'm like 98%. It was created by the University of Minnesota Duluth. They created this powered control wheel it basically breaks down all the different components involved in a power manipulating relationship.
Right.
Where there's a big power differential. So we see this a lot in domestic violence relationships and just any kind of unhealthy relationship. We see a lot of this. The reason why I want to point that out is because, in my opinion, that does a much better job of explaining power differentials than gaslighting.
Right.
Because the issue that we had with gaslighting last week is the same issue I still have with it this week, is that the term gaslighting is too broad. It's too general.
It's an unhelpful idea.
It doesn't help us get to a solution. Whereas if we look at the Minnesota Duluth Power and Control Wheel, it breaks down all those little segments. So the things in which someone would use gaslighting in, you can actually look at that wheel and you can see how it would be used.
Okay.
That's more beneficial for me as a therapist, or even as somebody in a relationship, to look at, because I can see, like I can visualize that. I know what's going on. I know what to do with that.
I like that. Right. And that was our big beef, was that gaslighting is an unhelpful term because it's too vague and it's weaponized and it's pushing people away from communication rather than engaging.
Yeah, so and it focuses on a larger issue where it's kind of like, it's so big I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Minnesota Duluth Power and Control Wheel, you can go right to it. You know, like, oh, I see what's happening here. Right. I know what to do with it.
But I really did appreciate Manu's, feedback, especially about the power differential, because in the workplace, that's an aspect we didn't think about.
Right. That's a good point. We didn't. I didn't consider that at all.
Yeah. And so this is exactly why we need your feedback, guys. Anytime you ever hear a segment and you think, man, I have some notes on that, or I just want to weigh in, tweet to us, Facebook us, or email us. You can always email podtherapyguys@gmail.com. And then, of course, facebook.com/podtherapy, or Twitter is just @podtherapyguys. But, we love getting that feedback. It's huge. So Definitely. We need it.
And she finishes up her email with, "Thank you for all the support. Oh, and if there's any way I can contribute to the show, please let me know." Yes, there is. You can find the guys who broke into Level 9 Studios.
And bury them in the desert.
Call Crime Stoppers and report them so we can get back to the studio.
That's right.
So we don't have to record.
That's right.
In our little blanket
share
forts
the
anymore.
podcast is probably the best thing I would ask, is share the podcast.
And continue to stay active. Keep writing us. It's fun.
That's right. We need the feedback. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.